Yes, okay. I wish my lectures would start like this, with a little bit of noise and a little bit with music, and some clapping. I quite like that. Good afternoon, morning. No, we're still morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us on this session. I've got a presentation around sustainability, and as this is going to be contextualizing the issue, we're going to focus a little bit on environmental issues, but as I'll show you, there's no such a thing as a pure environmental risk. And why we've got sustainability and why this conference obviously is happening around sustainability is because increasingly we're seeing focus on sustainability in all spheres. I come from a business perspective, but of course it happens in all organizations. It happens in, and increasingly now finally also in universities starting to talk around this. We've got ways on how universities and students have revolutionized sustainability. We've MIT do a lot of work around online and open source information around sustainability. We've had the Global University Network around innovation, listing sustainability as the key tool and implementer for innovation at this stage. EcoWatch reported about the top 10 universities taking the lead on sustainability. We now even have blogs and websites like bestcolleges.com referring to green universities, certifications around green universities. The Guardian, as we know, fairly a well-known newspaper, refers also to universities having to take the lead on the sustainability agenda. Queries around how green my university is. UNESCO, various divisions of the UN have taken up the sustainability challenge and the idea around it, trying to look at how we integrate sustainability into the university. And that obviously deals from how campuses are set up to how we procure to what our curriculum entails. We've had a strong link with the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm not sure if anyone's spoken to you guys about the SDGs in the last couple of days, but there's a specific focus on universities also looking at sustainability. And in the EU, they've even have an association. Oh, also don't have that during lectures. I quite like that too. They also, at the EU, have an international education collaboration around implementing sustainability. And specifically, there's HESI, which is the Higher Education Sustainability Initiative, which is a global initiative of which most South African universities belong to. Nature, which is a prominent science journal, featured this article a couple of years ago about how green is your campus. We've had various associations forming. One of the larger ones in the US and North America is the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. There's also the ISCN, which focuses more on Middle East and Eastern Europe. There's one focusing on South America and Latin America, the Sustainable Campus Network. And we've had a lot of initiatives in Africa as well. University World News reported in 2016 about the Green University Network being developed in Africa. UNEP, United Nations Environmental Programme, also has been closely involved with the Kenyan initiative around green universities. Procurement happens in most of the developed world universities. MIT's got a specific one. Yale even has a video indicating that they're trying to have less purchasing, and the purchasing that they do is around sustainable practices. When we talk about sustainability in South African context, and especially in a university context, it's often only referred to from a fees perspective, given the financial sustainability, concerns around higher education, challenges in higher education, and also opportunities. But that has expanded. We see even universities, University of Western Cape has now just for the third time in a row won Africa's Greenest Campus Award, which is a phenomenal feat. They did this a couple of months ago. You know that the National Research Foundation focuses on sustainability quite prominently in all of their funding and investment opportunities. And we had an entire initiative around how we mainstream environmental and sustainability concepts into African universities, the MISA partnership. All of this gets us to PURCO. As we know, as we can see there, the mission for PURCO is around saving time and saving money. But when you look a little further at PURCO's real value add, is they do talk about adding value to their members, which is more than just saving time and saving money. We're also talking about things like return on investment amongst PURCO's benefits and ideals. So this concept of just saving money, saving time, has started to evolve, and I'm going to introduce you to a concept we refer to as shared value. Because we're now talking about not just creating money or wealth, we're talking about creating value, and increasingly we're talking about creating shared value. And shared value simply refers to there's a business or organizational imperative and there's a societal imperative that we're trying to meet. So whether that is through purchasing, whether that is through curriculum development, campus development, all of that is how do we meet societal needs. Societal issues are quite front center in South Africa, from Fees Must Fall to Roads Must Fall to all kinds of initiatives, the financial sustainability of that. But increasingly, we're also looking to see how we use education to minimize the wealth gap, and how do we still create that economic value. So in business, we refer to as business value and social value. What projects, initiatives can we set in place in order to create this shared value? There's fantastic initiatives happening in business from a procurement perspective. You think about SAB Miller, who run a specific initiative around small, medium enterprises for their distribution and transportation networks. There's all kinds of things around recycling and greening initiatives from an environmental perspective. And that then gets us to why we're even talking about sustainability. So sustainability has the idea of longevity. When we want a project, a campus, an organization to be sustainable, we assume we want it to last longer than its competitors. So we always talk about creating value, but in sustainability we have to talk about creating, but also keeping that value, sustaining that value. And therefore we have to start considering what value are we adding, whether we're purchasing as an individual, as a household, or as an organization. And from a supply perspective, how are we looking at improving sustainability in part of our entire supply chain, and conversely in our entire value chain? I was asked to talk about environmental risk, and it's hard for me to talk about environmental risk because the entire thing around sustainability is, as I'll show, it ends up just being risk. There's no such a thing as just an environmental risk. Any pollution, any loss of forest, any aspect around lack of water, all of that is not just an environmental risk. All of that links to a societal risk, all of that links to an economic risk, all of that links to a reputational risk, all of that links to a brand risk. So we'll talk about risk in general, even though our focus is on environmental. And of course, because I'm a business school lecturer, I hate just talking about risk. It's so compliance orientated. We have to be innovative. So we have to start looking at opportunity as well. And the flip side of all risk is opportunity. So we want to not just be compliant and manage risk, we also want to be opportunistic and see where we have opportunities to develop new products and services. So the conventional view on sustainability is a three-pillared approach. They talk about the three pillars of sustainability. There's a social component, an environmental component, and an economic component. So when we talk about the three pillars of sustainability, it's usually been in the past around how do we balance these three aspects? How do we save money? How do we make a profit? How do we keep revenue? How do we also do that from a societal sustainability perspective, creating jobs, having healthy society and individuals, but also trying to do that from a minimizing environmental risk perspective. So we try and balance all three, and as you can see, the middle bit is the sustainable bit. That has changed. In the last 10 years or so, we've started expanding this idea of sustainability. We still have the idea of creating and sustaining value. I've referred to the triple bottom line. All JSE listed companies have to report on environmental, social, financial, and governance components. As the name of the conference suggests, we also have the 3 Ps called the People, Planet, Profit paradigm. You guys might be familiar with corporate social responsibility and also CSI, which universities are usually quite interested in. It's our corporate social investment. How do we use that from a corporate perspective for third stream income? And the broader meaning that sustainability has taken on in the last few years is actually placing those three circles in very different forms. Environment is the last, there's a question there, I'm not sure if someone, oh, okay, all right. Can you hear me still? All right, okay. Environment is our biggest circle, and I'll talk about that just now, where we say these three circles aren't equal sizes, and balancing those three circles can't just be trying to balance them as though they are of equal importance. Conventional view and the more innovative view is around understanding that the environment is everything that we have. All products and services, all the air that we breathe, all the food that we eat comes from the environment. No organization, no economy can exist without it. And of course, in between, society is larger than the economy because just like our parents told us when we were young, money does not grow on trees. We need to make something out of the environment through skills, resources, and social capital into an economic capital or financial capital. So we've taken this more recent view around sustainability, and this is where the focus of my presentation is going to be, around the environment, why we consider the environment as important. Incidentally, this is also how South Africa has defined sustainability and sustainable development in our country. 10 years ago, we developed a national framework on sustainable development, which also puts what they refer to as ecosystem services, which I'll talk to just now, on the large circle. Inside that, you have your socio-political environment, and inside that, you have your economy. Because without a healthy and thriving environment, you cannot have a healthy and thriving society. And without a healthy and thriving society, you cannot have a healthy and thriving economy. They've added a fourth component called governance. Governance is simply how we control and manage organizations, not just governmental organizations. So it's part of our policies, our ethics, that component in it. This has led to the development of something called the quadruple bottom line, actually not the triple bottom line, which Ban Ki-moon, the previous UN secretary, referred to at the last Sustainable Development Conference in Rio, as we need organizations everywhere to deliver value, again this word value, not money, to not just be financially. We also need these organizations to deliver this value in terms of social, environmental, and ethical terms. This is the quadruple bottom line he referred to. A few months later, in the same year, in 2012, he spoke at the World Business Council on Sustainable Development and said that we need to look at the quadruple bottom line, report publicly on the results and the progress. Such responsible and sustainable organizational practices can bring about lasting and positive change. This is your responsibility. It's also your opportunity. It's again trying to understand how we see this not just as minimizing a risk and managing compliance, but looking at it from an opportunity perspective. So we actually refer to it as our business school as People, Planet, Profit, and we've added our own fourth P called Principles and Purpose. There's not a single organization whose mission and vision in the world is to make money. We're all trying to be financially sustainable, but we're increasingly having to understand that our financial sustainability depends on how we treat labor, how we treat society, and how we treat the environment. So when we talk about this environment, usually we think about things like trees and bunny huggers and all the green issues. We might think about the big five and animals. We might consider things like rivers and flows of water, or even the ocean and coasts. But of course, the environment that we were taught in primary school around fauna and flora is more than just plants and animals. When we talk about ecosystem services, a new term I want to introduce you to, is we need to understand what an ecosystem is. And an ecosystem is the interaction between these different living and non-living parts. So from the soil to the water to the air, and then also the plants and the animals. That's what we refer to as an ecosystem. But of course, we don't understand ecosystems well because we don't understand systems really well. So I'm going to start with something that we do know. We all understand our bodies. Our bodies work in a systematic approach as well. We have a system of things. We have different kind of body systems that function, from a skeletal system to a vascular system to a respiration system, a digestive system, a reproductive system. And of course, if you have a problem in the one, it'll likely cause a problem in the other. And the ecosystem works exactly the same. So when everyone talks about climate change, for instance, and they say, oh, we're worried about a 2-degree warming of the planet. We don't understand 2 degrees from a climate perspective because we only know weather. So we think about, today it's 25 degrees, tomorrow, yesterday it was 27 degrees. That's the only thing. We don't understand climate. But the planet is like a system, so 2 degrees warming would be us getting a 2-degree fever. And we all, if anyone's ever had a fever close to 40 degrees, will understand that various systems in your body start shutting down. Your organs don't work as well, you can't regulate temperature that well, all of those aspects. The same happens in an ecosystem perspective. So we actually refer to various ecosystem services. I'm not going to bore you with all the detail of it. I'm going to refer you to a link there from the World Wildlife Fund. They've got an entire report that they bring out every second year on ecosystem services in the planet, but also in the country, that refers to where the different things are. I'm going to briefly talk about 3 key services we get from an ecosystem. And this is all based on natural capital. We're all quite familiar with financial capital. We've heard a lot about social capital. But of course, natural capital is the thing that we all need. It's the thing that we all live on. So it is our capital that provides us with free services. We have some direct ones, we have some indirect services, and we have what we refer to as aesthetic or ethical services as well that we get from the environment. Some of the direct ones we all know. There's not a single person here who doesn't eat, so we all have to eat. All the food we get, whether it's plant-based, animal-based, even lab-based, comes ultimately from some kind of a natural environment perspective. All the clothes we wear, somewhere there's got to be cotton fields, somewhere it's got to be wool on sheep. All of that comes from the environment, leather on cows. Housing, even though we don't make mud huts anymore, we still use mud in its various forms. We use quarries, we need sandstone, we need all of these things in order to make cement. All of that comes from nature. Medicinal values, all of our medicines ultimately come from some form of natural product. And then, of course, we have the direct things like oil, which is a natural product that comes from nature. We have our brine and things that make us warm and cook food from. That's all provided by nature. And we even have transport and distribution that happens by nature. When we talk about the indirect services, it's the things we can't directly see. Remember this word photosynthesis that we did in primary school, where we talked about plants breathing in CO2 and carbon dioxide and breathing out oxygen, and we do vice versa. So all plants become our little oxygen makers. There's also not a single person here who doesn't use oxygen. Heaven forbid, unless you're in places like China, where you can now purchase oxygen in things like a Pick and Pay, a retail center. They have an app to show how bad the pollution levels are for not going outside your house or to school. And everyone checks that every day in the big cities in China because of the nature has not been able to keep up with making pure oxygen. We have things like wetlands, which we don't understand, which is more than just the estuaries and St. Lucia and that. But these are the things, all rivers and wetlands and plants around rivers, they are all water purifiers. All the runoff that happens, all the rain that falls, all of that gets purified by things like wetlands. Coral reefs, we know, are not just protectors of the coastline because they have a physical barrier. They also are nursery areas for fish. So there you can see a nice photograph. You can see the corals, the range of corals happening just next to the coast. They act as formal breaks, as though we had put up a bridge or a breakwater. So when there are big storm surges and tsunamis, this is why we even refer to as the Great Barrier Reef as a barrier. It creates a barrier between big, large oceans and the coastal environment. Coral reefs are also the key focus where we have fishing nurseries. Fish don't just spawn in the middle of the ocean. They usually go to calmer areas where predation is less. And we have this even in mangroves areas. Anyone been to Durban, very close to the yacht club there, there's a protected mangrove area that's inside a working terminal and harbor that also provide that. And as we know, small fish are simply food for big fish, and that's an entire fishing industry that's dependent on those. Soil is another benefit that nature gives us. We don't have to pay nature in order to produce nutrients in the soil in order to have agriculture. We pay for all the additional aspects. We've even started using soil in these kind of things. Here's one of the largest green roofs in the world. It's Ford, the motor manufacturing company in Detroit in the US. They were the first really large green roof where instead of spending $35 million on a stormwater system to purify the surrounding air and the surrounding stormwater that comes off every time it rains, they put up a green roof at a fifth of the price, and there's no maintenance requirements for it. We've started seeing places like Boston Medical Center, large medical hospital in the States, that have a green roof that they've also started using as a vegetable garden. They use this for all their patient care and patient food, and the excess they sell or give to the local community. So they have created not just a green roof with grass, but also using this as part of their stormwater management, climate regulation, and food provision. So they have greatly reduced their requirements around purchasing food. And then lastly, the aesthetic aspect from nature. These are all the things we know. Whenever we go to a game park or a wildlife reserve, there's tourism associated with it, there's brand associated with it. All of us, when we have our braai last month on the 24th of September, none of us do it indoors. We all try and look to nature and sunlight somewhere to go and enjoy it. Things like trees provide us with calming and aesthetic value. We have things like mountains and forests, flowers. The Wild Coast, obviously, is I've slight biased because of my Eastern Cape origins. All of that provides us what we call aesthetic value. That's sometimes hard to put a price on. And all of that we do, obviously, for the next generation. It's not just about saving the rhino and making sure the polar bears are all right. It's making sure that the next generation also have clean water, clean air, access to these services that we get for free from nature. It's not on a line item. There's no budget line for it to say, this is how much we paid a tree to produce oxygen. This is how much we paid apples to be manufactured. All of that happens for free. So these are services that we currently get for free that we're not calculating. And that kind of links us to our formal definition of sustainability, which simply says that we're trying to develop in such a way that we meet the needs of our our present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their same needs. You look at the water crisis in Cape Town at the moment, where there's not just concerns about the next generation, but even within their own generation, where the concerns are happening. I see today, even in the Vaal, there's been a call for the army to step in to deal with the sewage issues at the Vaal. So that all of that is even within our current generation. And this concept gives us the idea of needs, but also the idea of limitations. Ecological credit and debt works exactly the same as financial credit and debt. As you can see, South Africa is red. Red, just like on your bank statement, is the same. It's the brackets around the end of your bank statement. It means that we're in deficit. We are currently using more resources than what our country can provide. What you can see is there's a lot of countries with red aspects in them, which simply means that, as in South Africa, their demand, which is the red line, is increasing, and their capability to meet that demand is decreasing, which is the green line. So when we start understanding sustainability from these three-pillared approach, or the quadruple bottom line approach, we understand where the environment fits in. It's not just about being green and all of these things. It's about understanding that if we run out of water, most of us have jobs. We simply go down to Pick n Pay, we go to our Woolies, we go and buy new water. If you are poor, you have no option to go and spend 20 Rand on 5 liters of water. Get there, all of those things. You have to work with what nature provides you. So there's a large inequality issue around it as well. And if that happens, we have to understand that if society is being reduced in their productivity because they don't have a productive environment, they don't have access to water, they don't have access to a healthy environment, to nutrients in their soil to grow their crops, they don't have access to clean air, then that starts having an impact on our economy. It's not always immediate, it's not always in this financial year, so we need to start making those links in our brain. We're all in management, we all understand that there's a requirement for us we can't silo approach things anymore. Everything we purchase, everything we develop, everything we consider has to consider what the environmental impact could be and also what the social impact could be, because we can't separate these two. If there's an impact on the environment, it's definitely going to impact on society, and again, that impact is not equal. The impact on the poor is significantly worse than the impact on the rich. I'm going to show you a very quick clip. This was made, you'll hear Julia Roberts' voice, so it's a slight change from my monotonous lecturing tone, but it gives us a little sense of nature, the ability of nature to evolve, whether it gets 2 degrees hotter, whether it runs without water, whether it turns the Western Cape into a desert, whether it turns KZN into floods. It doesn't matter. Nature will be around. Our concern about nature and the environment is our quality of life on it, our productivity on it, our economy on it, our society on it.
Some call me nature. Others call me Mother Nature. I've been here for over 4.5 billion years. 22,500 times longer than you. I don't really need people, but people need me. Yes, your future depends on me. When I thrive, you thrive. When I falter, you falter. Or worse. But I've been here for eons. I have fed species greater than you, and I have starved species greater than you. My oceans, my soil, my flowing streams, my forests, they all can take you or leave you. How you choose to live each day, whether you regard or disregard me, doesn't really matter to me. One way or the other. Your actions will determine your fate, not mine. I am nature. I will go on. I am prepared to evolve. Are you?
So that just gives us a sense. They've got various other clips. You can go to their website and have a look at it. They've got one for water, for flowers, for all kinds of things, for trees. But it is this understanding that we need to, when we talk about things like the Sustainable Development Goals, we can't just say that poverty is there, life below water is there, climate change is there, responsible consumption is there. All of these things are linked, and all of these things come from the basis of what nature provides us. Now, we can either help nature to provide it at optimal, or we can hinder it. She's willing to move on, she's willing to survive. How resistant we are to that, we'll need to see. And again, as rich people, we'll tend to be more resilient than as poor people. So all of these aspects, a lot of the focus is on SDG 12, which talks about responsible consumption and production. We work with quite a lot of organizations on how to green their supply chain, not just from an environmental perspective, but also from a social perspective. So that's all the things on how do I do this better? How do I reduce waste? How do I work with small business? How do I improve inequality? What is my role in playing in making sure that climate change does not escalate, that hunger is not perpetuated in poor communities, that we have sustainable cities and sustainable functioning communities, that there's peace and justice. So we all need to start understanding what our individual roles are. I'm going to end off with this last clip. It was every year at Davos, at the WEF, the World Economic Forum. There's increasingly a talk around sustainability. Incidentally, if you look at the World Economic Forum top risks associated with the world, everything on the high risk, high impact side, 90% of those risks are environmental. From climate change to lack of water to flooding. There's only one other aspect, which is cybersecurity, which is not an environmental risk. That is now on the World Economic Forum, not the Environmental Forum's risk. Climate change has taken over the UN Security Council as the top risk of, with terrorism following now in second risk in the world. So this is something we need to understand. This clip was launched at, just very briefly trying to understand how the Sustainable Development Goals work from an impact perspective, and that was launched in January. So I would like to encourage you guys to think about this as your platform to talk about these issues around people, planet, profit. I want you to consider that what will your role be as an individual, as a household, as a manager in an organization, as an employee in an organization. What will be your impact, and will that be a positive impact for the current and the next generation, or will it be a negative one? And what will you contribute? What will you be able to do from your perspective, even, no matter how small, in order to start dealing with these aspects? I thank you very much. Any